The door that would open. The storm chased me through the forest like it had a personal grudge. Rain slapped my face, my shoes sank into mud, and my phone blinked at 1% like it was counting down my courage. I was supposed to be filming a fun weekend challenge for my channel, exploring a rumored abandoned castle, cracking jokes, acting fearless. But the laughter died somewhere between the crooked trees and the distant thunder that sounded too much like warning. When the castle finally rose out of the dark, it didn't look abandoned. It looked awake. Black stone walls gleamed with wetness, and vines crawled like veins across tall windows. A single lantern burned beside a heavy wooden door, the flame steady despite the wind. That should have been my first sign to turn back. I knocked anyway, half to prove to myself I could. The door opened silently, and warmth rolled out like a breath. Not the cozy warmth of a home, more like the air in a chapel at midnight, scented with old wood, candle wax, and something faintly sweet I couldn't name. I stepped inside before I could think better of it, dripping onto a floor so polished it reflected the lantern light like water. The door closed behind me on its own. I turned quickly, tugged the handle, and felt my stomach drop. It didn't move. No click, no give, just solid, final resistance. I laughed under my breath, the way you do when you're trying to pretend you aren't scared. Okay, I whispered to myself. Cool, funny, haunted door, great content. A low voice answered from the shadows, close enough that my skin tightened. It is not haunted. I spun around so fast my shoulder bag swung forward like a shield. A man stood a few steps away, tall and still, as if he'd been there the whole time. He wore a dark coat that looked too expensive for a place like this, and his hair was tied back neatly, untouched by the storm. His face was pale, not sickly, more like moonlight made human. But it was his eyes that caught me, deep, steady, and strangely sad. I didn't hear you walk, I said, trying to sound brave and failing. That is not your fault, he replied. The words should have comforted me, but something about his calm made my fear sharper. Calm like he already knew how this would end. I shifted my weight, forcing a smile. Look, I'm sorry if this is your place. I thought it was abandoned. I'll leave if the door decides to cooperate. His gaze flicked to the locked door, then back to me. For a moment, his expression tightened, like someone swallowing a truth that tastes bitter. It will not open, he said. My throat went dry, because it stuck. Because I sealed it. The air seemed to drop a few degrees. I couldn't tell if my hands were shaking from cold or panic. Every horror story I'd ever mocked in a reaction video marched into my head and formed a line. I took a step backward. Why would you do that? He didn't move toward me, which somehow made it worse. He looked past me, like he was studying something invisible on the wall. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. Because something followed you. I froze. That's not funny. I do not joke, he said, and then, like he was correcting himself, he added, not anymore. There was a softness in that last part, as if it hurt him to admit it. A crack of thunder rattled the stained glass windows. The castle groaned the way old buildings do, settling under the weight of time. Somewhere deeper inside, a clock ticked once then again, too loud in the silence. I swallowed hard. Who are you? He hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw it, an exhaustion that didn't belong to a predator. The kind you see in people who have been strong for too long without anyone noticing. I am Valen, he said finally, king of this house. I almost laughed at the word king, because it sounded ridiculous in the modern world, and because fear makes you want to deny the shape of it. But everything about him carried authority without trying. The stillness, the control, the way the castle seemed to wait for his permission to breathe. My voice came out thin. So, you're like, what some cosplay guy with a big vocabulary. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, more like pain, like I'd accidentally stepped on something fragile. If calling me a name makes you less afraid, he said, then do it, but listen to me. A gust of wind pressed against the windows. The lantern flame leaned, then straightened again as if pushed by an unseen hand. I heard it then, faint, like nails brushing wood, not inside the room. Outside the door. My skin prickled. What is that? Valen's jaw tightened. He lifted one hand, palm open, not toward me but toward the door, as if holding it in place with sheer will. That, he said, is why you must stay near me tonight. Near him. The words landed like a trap disguised as safety. I backed away again, hitting the edge of a long table. My bag slipped to the floor with a soft thud. Why would I trust you? He looked at me with the strangest expression, something like regret mixed with restraint. Because if I wanted to harm you, he said, voice steady, you would not be standing. Silence stretched between us, thick as the castle walls. I wanted to call for help, but my phone was dead. I wanted to run, but the door wouldn't open. I wanted to tell myself this was a prank, but the sound at the door was growing more impatient, scratching, pausing, scratching again, like it could smell fear. Valen stepped closer, slowly, giving me time to pull away. The lantern light touched the side of his face, revealing a small detail I hadn't noticed before. His knuckles were bruised, like he'd hit stone until it gave. You fought something, I said without meaning to. His eyes softened, almost human. I fought myself, he murmured. That sentence didn't make sense, and yet it hit me harder than any threat. Then he did something I didn't expect. He bowed his head, not in superiority, but in humility, like he was asking permission to exist in the same space. I do not wish to frighten you, he said, but you are in danger, and so am I. I stared at him, heart hammering, caught between terror and an uneasy curiosity. Outside, the scratching stopped. For one breath, the castle felt like it was holding still. And then a voice whispered through the door, soft, sweet, familiar. My name. I went cold. I hadn't told Valen my name. Valen's hand shot out and gently gripped my wrist, not tight, but urgent, as if keeping me from stepping closer. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, fear showed on his face. Do not answer, he whispered. It is not calling you, it is learning you. The whisper came again, warmer this time, like someone I loved was just on the other side, waiting to be let in. And my hand, against my will, started to reach for the lock, the voice behind the door. My fingers hovered inches from the lock, and the whisper said my name again, softer, almost playful, like it knew exactly how to tilt my heart. The sound wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It felt like it was inside my memories, wearing them like perfume. Valen tightened his hold on my wrist, still gentle but unshakable. Breathe, he murmured, as if he'd felt my panic spike before I did. Do not let it borrow your longing. My longing, I whispered, embarrassed by the word, even in fear. His eyes flicked to my face, then away, as if the truth was too personal. It calls with what you miss, he said. It guesses until it finds the right key. Outside, the voice changed. It's cold in here, it said in the exact tone of my older sister, Lena, dead for 3 years. The same teasing complaint she used to make when I turned the AC too high. My lungs stopped working for a second. My vision blurred. No, I breathed, and the sound came out like a prayer and a protest at the same time. Valen's expression cracked with something that looked like sympathy, real sympathy, not the fake kind people offer when they're uncomfortable. I am sorry, he said quietly. It has chosen a cruel mask. It's her, I insisted, even as part of me knew the impossibility. That's her voice. Valen's thumb pressed lightly against the inside of my wrist, right where my pulse was racing. The touch was grounding, like he was reminding my body it still belonged to me. If it were her, he said, she would knock the way she used to. She would say something only she would say, not something that hurts you into opening a door. The whisper shifted again, sweet as honey. "Come on," Lena's voice coaxed. "Just open it. I'm right here. I missed you." My knees threatened to fold. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't leave. It just learns new places to hide. And that voice was dragging it out of hiding with gentle hands. I swallowed hard and forced a shaky laugh, the kind I used in my videos when something went wrong. "Okay," I said loudly, aiming my words at the door and my fear. "If you're Lena, tell me the dumb nickname you gave me when I tried to cook pasta and set off the smoke alarm." Silence. Valen's gaze sharpened. He didn't look impressed. He looked relieved, like he'd been afraid I wouldn't fight back. The whisper returned, slower this time, testing a different angle. "Please," it said, now in my mother's voice, tired and pleading. "I need you." I flinched so hard my shoulders hit the table behind me. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in years either, not since she'd left when I was 16, leaving behind a note and an emptiness that never fully closed. My anger had built a wall around that wound, but the voice slid right through. Valen stepped between me and the door, blocking it with his body like a shield. His posture was calm, but his hands were tense, fingers slightly curled as if holding back a storm. "Why is it doing this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What is it?" "A hungry echo," Valen answered, eyes fixed on the door. "A thing that cannot enter unless invited. It feeds on the permission you give it." "So it's like," my mouth went dry, "like a demon." Valen hesitated. "Names are small containers," he said. "This one does not fit neatly." The door trembled, just once subtle like a breath against wood. Then the whisper came again, closer, more confident. "You're not safe with him," my mother's voice said. "He's lying to you." I looked at Valen's profile. His face stayed controlled, but something in his eyes flickered, as if that accusation had landed in a place already sore. "Are you lying?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. He didn't turn to me right away. When he did, his gaze was steady, not offended. More like resigned, like a man used to being doubted, used to earning trust inch by inch and still losing it. "I am not lying," he said, "but I have lived long enough to understand why you want to believe the voice more than you want to believe me." That hit me because it was true. A part of me wanted the door to open and for my whole life to undo itself, to have my sister back, to have my mother choose me, to have anyone, say they missed me. Valen took a small step away from the door and toward the center of the room, creating space as if he refused to corner me. "You came here searching for a story," he said. "I can see it in your eyes. You are brave in the way that makes people laugh, because laughter is how you keep from breaking." My throat tightened. He couldn't possibly know that, and yet it felt painfully accurate. "I didn't plan to," I started. "To be alone," he finished gently. "Neither did I." For a heartbeat, the castle felt less like a prison and more like a shelter. I hated myself for feeling that. The whisper turned sharp, impatient. "Open the door," it demanded, no longer wearing a familiar voice. The sweetness peeled away, and underneath was something hollow, like wind moving through a graveyard. The lantern flame bent toward the door as if pulled. Valen's jaw clenched. "It is losing patience," he said. "That is dangerous." "What happens if it gets in?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze dropped to his own hands, those bruised knuckles, the controlled fingers. When he spoke, his voice was softer, as if he was confessing something. "It will try to use you," he said. "And if it cannot, it will try to use me." My fear spiked again, but this time it wasn't only for myself. "Use you how?" Valen looked up, and the sorrow in his eyes felt ancient. "It knows what I am," he said. "It wants what I refuse to be." Before I could ask what that meant, the whisper outside suddenly became laughter, thin, delighted wrong. The door handle rattled once, then twice, then held still, as if whatever was out there had decided it no longer needed to rush. A cold understanding slid down my spine. "It's waiting," I whispered. Valen nodded once. "It is listening to us," he said, learning where to press. And then, without warning, the heavy door clicked. Not from the outside. From the inside. My eyes widened as the lock turned by itself, slow and deliberate. The seal Valen had made, whatever it was unraveling like thread being pulled loose. I stared at Valen. "You said you sealed it." "I did," he said, voice tightening for the first time. "I did." The handle began to move downward, millimeter by millimeter, as if an invisible hand was testing it. Valen stepped forward fast, pressing his palm against the wood. The air around his hand shimmered faintly, like heat rising off stone, and the lantern flame flared, then dimmed. His breath came harsher now, the calm slipping. "It is not breaking my seal," he whispered, eyes wide with realization. "It is breaking yours." I didn't understand until I felt it. A pull in my chest, like a memory reaching for daylight. Not the voice outside this time, but something inside me, my own hope, my own grief, leaning toward the door, wanting relief so badly it was willing to pay any price. My hand lifted again, trembling. Valen caught it, and for the first time his touch wasn't only gentle, it was desperate. "Look at me," he said, voice low and commanding, not like a king ordering a subject, but like a friend begging you to stay present. "If you open it, it will wear your love like skin." The handle dropped another fraction. Valen's eyes flashed, and I saw it, the truth he'd been hiding behind restraint. Not a monster, not a hero, but a man starving for control over something dark inside him. "Then tell me," I cried, tears hot and sudden. "Tell me what you are." Valen's mouth opened, and for a moment he looked like he might finally say it, might finally trust me with the whole truth. But the door creaked. A thin line of darkness appeared between the wood and the frame, as if the room itself was blinking open. And from that narrow gap, a breath of cold air slid in, carrying the unmistakable scent of my sister's perfume. Valen's voice dropped to a whisper, shattered with fear and fury. "Stay behind me," he said, "no matter what you hear." The gap widened another inch. And something on the other side whispered, not my name this time, but Valen, S. "King," it purred, "I found your heart, the kindness that breaks the curse." Cold poured through the opening like a living thing, curling around my ankles and climbing my legs until my skin went numb. The scent of Lena's perfume grew stronger, not comforting anymore, too perfect, too deliberate, like someone had recreated it from a description instead of a memory. The door continued to drift inward, slow as a smile. Valen moved in front of me completely, shoulders squared, one hand pressed to the wood as if he could hold the entire world back by force of will. In the lantern's dim light, he looked less like a king and more like a guardian who'd been standing watch for centuries with no one to relieve him. "King," the voice purred again from the gap, velvet over something sharp. "You sealed me out once. Do you think you can do it again now that she's here?" Valen didn't answer it. He spoke to me instead without turning his head. "If you speak to it, it will learn faster," he said. "If you step toward it, it will believe you chose it." My throat ached with unshed tears and unanswered questions. "It's using my family," I whispered. "It's using everything I ever." "I know," he said, and the way he said it told me he didn't mean I understand in theory. He meant I have lived inside that kind of hunger. The darkness in the gap shifted, almost playful. "She misses you," it cooed in Lena's voice, but now the sweetness had cracks in it. "She's right here, little sister, just one step." My knees trembled, but I stayed behind Valen. I dug my fingernails into my palm, anchoring myself to pain I could control. "Tell me the nickname," I said, voice shaking but clear, throwing the same test again like a rope across a river. "If you're Lena, tell me." The thing paused. The pause felt like it was thinking, searching through my reactions, scanning me like a book with missing pages. Then it tried to laugh the way my sister laughed. It was wrong, too polished. Lena's laughter had always had a hiccup at the end, like joy surprised her every time. My eyes burned. "You're not her," I whispered, and the words hurt worse than fear. They hurt because they were acceptance. The darkness rippled, irritated. "Fine," it hissed, dropping the familiar mask. The voice deepened into something older. "Then let me wear something else." The air tightened. The lantern flame bowed low. The gap widened another inch, and for a heartbeat I saw nothing but blackness, as if the world on the other side was a room without walls. Valen's breathing changed. A tremor ran through his arm where his palm pressed the door, like a muscle fighting a cramp. "Valen," I said, unable to stop myself. "What is it talking about, your heart?" His jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "It thinks my compassion is a weakness," he said. "It has been trying to turn it into a doorway for centuries." The thing chuckled. "Compassion," it echoed with disgust. "The great King Valen, the gentle tyrant who refuses to feed on fear, the one who starves himself to feel human." The words landed like a slap, not because they were cruel, but because they sounded like they'd been rehearsed, like the creature had been waiting a long time to say them out loud. My stomach twisted. "Starves," I breathed. Valen's shoulders rose and fell slowly. "Yes," he admitted. "I have rules. I made them when I still remembered my mother's prayers." The confession was quiet, almost reverent, and it made the castle feel less like a haunted place and more like a sanctuary built out of stubborn will. The creature pressed harder. The door shuddered. "Open," it whispered, no longer pleading, ordering. "Open for me, little human. You're tired of being strong. Let me carry your grief. Let me fix what hurts." I felt that pull in my chest again, that dangerous instinct to surrender. Not because I wanted darkness, but because I wanted relief. That's how traps work. They look like rest. Valen's hand slipped slightly on the wood. His face tightened, and for the first time I saw it, something bright and controlled behind his eyes, like a storm held inside a glass jar. He wasn't just holding the door. He was holding himself. "If it enters," Valen said, voice strained, "it will not only take you. It will take the part of me I've protected. It will turn my restraint into hunger." I swallowed. My fear shifted into something sharper, protectiveness, anger, courage. The kind that shows up when someone else is about to be used. "I'm not opening it," I said. The creature laughed softly. "You already did. Every time you wished your dead would speak again. Every time you begged the universe to undo your life. Every time you told yourself you were alone." My eyes stung because it wasn't wrong. Grief had been my private door, cracked open for years. Valen spoke, low and urgent. "Listen to me. This is the only way." He finally turned his head enough that I could see his face fully. The calm was still there, but it was cracked open to reveal raw honesty. "I can hold it back," he said. "But not while your heart is reaching for it. You must choose fully, not with words, with something true." My voice broke. "What does that mean?" His gaze didn't waver. "Forgive yourself," he said. "Stop begging the past to return. Choose the life that is still yours." A bitter laugh slipped out of me, half sob, half disbelief. In the middle of a monster at the door. "Yes," Valen said, and his voice softened. "Especially now. The creature feeds on the parts of you that believe you deserve to suffer. Starve it." The door creaked wider, as if mocking our conversation. Cold air rushed in and made the lantern flicker wildly. The creature's voice turned sweet again, surgical in its kindness. Your sister wouldn't want you to hurt, it whispered. Your mother wouldn't want you to be lonely. Let me take it. Let me make you feel loved. I closed my eyes, and for one terrifying moment I imagined it. Lena hugging me, her hair damp from rain, her arms warm, my grief finally quiet. My whole body leaned toward that fantasy like a thirsty plant toward water. Then I remembered the real Lena. She would have rolled her eyes at a monster pretending to be her. She would have shoved me behind her and said, "Absolutely not, babe." Like this was an argument with a rude stranger at the grocery store. And I remembered something else, the last message I never replied to. The last time she said, "Call me when you get home, okay? Don't be stubborn." I'd been busy. I'd thought there would be time. The guilt rose like a wave. I opened my eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry." The creature perked up, almost delighted. "Yes," it breathed. "Say it, admit it, you failed her." My hands shook. Tears slid down my cheeks, warm against the cold air. "No," I said, and my voice surprised me, steady, clear. "I'm not apologizing to you." Valen's gaze snapped to mine, as if he felt something shift. "I'm apologizing to her," I said, looking at the dark gap. "Because I loved her, because I miss her, because I didn't know how to hold grief without turning it into punishment." The creature hissed softly, the sound of frustration. I took a step closer, not toward the opening, but toward Valen, closing the distance so my shoulder nearly touched his back. I could feel the tension in him, the restraint trembling at the edge. "And I forgive myself," I said, words falling out like stones I'd carried too long. "For being human, for not predicting tragedy, for surviving." The cold in the room faltered, like a flame struggling for oxygen. The creature's voice sharpened. "Don't you dare," it snarled. "You don't get to be free, not without paying." Valen drew a ragged breath, as if my words had given him air. The shimmer around his palm brightened slightly, but it wasn't aggressive. It was controlled, focused. "You hear that?" he whispered to me. "It is frightened." The door jerked, angry now, trying to force its way in. The gap widened just enough for me to see movement, something like shadow folding into the shape of a person, then losing it again. The creature tried one last time, and it chose Valen's voice. "My queen," it said in his tone, intimate and broken. "Help me, I can't hold it back. I need you to open the door." My stomach dropped. I glanced at Valen, horrified at how accurately it mimicked him, how it tried to turn trust into a weapon. Valen flinched, as if hearing his own voice used that way was a kind of violation. His eyes met mine. "Do you see?" he said quietly. "It will wear any love it can steal." I nodded, swallowing panic. "Tell me what to do." Valen hesitated, and I saw the humility in him again, this king who didn't command, who asked. "Offer it something it cannot digest," he said. "What?" He swallowed. "Kindness," he answered, like the word was both his greatest strength and his most dangerous risk. My brows pulled together. "Kindness to that." "Not to it," Valen said. "To yourself, to me, to the truth." He shifted his stance, bracing. "When I release the seal to close it again, it will surge forward. It wants my hunger. If I lose control, if I become what it thinks I am, I will not be able to stop." A pulse of fear shot through me. "Then don't release it." "I must," he said, "or it will keep picking at the crack in you until you do it for it." The room seemed to breathe with us. The door handle twitched like a finger. Valen's voice dropped to something almost tender. "If you see me change, if you see the darkness rise in me, speak my name. Not like a command, like a reminder." My throat tightened. Why would my voice matter? "Because you are the first human in a very long time who looked at me and saw more than a legend," Valen said. "You saw a man trying." The words hit with unexpected warmth, right in the center of my chest. In the middle of terror, something gentle took root. Connection. I nodded once fierce. "Valen," I said, practicing it like a promise. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if taking that sound into himself, then opened them again, focused, resolved. "Now," he whispered. He lifted his hand from the door. The darkness surged. The gap widened suddenly, the cold punching into the room like a gust through a broken window. The lantern flame nearly died. The shadow tried to pour in, a shapeless hunger reaching for Valen's chest like it knew the exact location of his restraint. Valen stiffened, his breath caught. For a terrifying second, his eyes flashed brighter, predatory, ancient, and the bruises on his knuckles looked like old vows breaking. "King," the creature crooned, thrilled. "Yes, finally." Panic rose in my throat, but I grabbed it by the roots. I stepped forward, not to fight with fists, but with the only weapon I had left, my voice, my choice, my heart. "Valen," I said, loud and steady, letting the name carry everything I meant. "You are not alone. You are not a monster to me. You can choose." His gaze snapped to mine. The predatory flash wavered. I kept going, tears falling freely now. "You don't have to prove your goodness by suffering," I said. "You don't have to starve to deserve being human. You already are because you care." The creature recoiled, as if the words burned, not violently but truthfully. It shrieked in frustration, the sound like wind slamming 1,000 doors. Valen's shoulders shook. He drew in a breath that sounded like a man choosing life. Then he pressed his palm back onto the wood, not with anger, but with resolve, and the shimmer flared, bright enough to paint the room in pale silver. The door slammed shut with a thunderous finality, the lock clicking like a period at the end of a sentence. Silence fell so suddenly my ears rang. The lantern steadied. The air warmed by degrees, like the castle was exhaling. I stood frozen, waiting for the whisper to return. It didn't. Valen remained facing the door for a long moment, palm still against it, as if he didn't trust his victory. When he finally turned around, his face was drawn, exhausted, but his eyes were clear again. No storm, no hunger. He looked at me like he couldn't quite believe I was still there. "You chose," he said quietly. I nodded, wiping my cheeks with the back of my sleeve, suddenly embarrassed by my tears and not sorry for them at all. "So did you." For a second, something like a smile tried to form on his mouth and failed, as if he hadn't used the muscle in a long time. Then, because my body couldn't hold that much tension without doing something stupid, I let out a shaky laugh. "You know," I said, voice hoarse, "my subscribers are never going to believe this. Trapped in a castle with a vampire king was supposed to be clickbait." Valen blinked, genuinely confused. "Clickbait." I snorted through my tears. "It means I make dramatic titles so people watch the video. It's kind of my job." He studied me with the seriousness of someone trying to learn a new language. "Humans are strange," he said. "Yeah," I replied, "we really are." A beat passed, and the heaviness returned, not fear this time, but the weight of what came next. The storm still raged outside. My phone was still dead. The door might be sealed, but I was still trapped in a castle with a vampire king whose compassion had nearly been used to destroy him. I hugged my arms around myself. "So what now?" I asked. Valen's gaze drifted to the tall windows, to the black night beyond them. "Now," he said, "we wait for dawn, and then I will open the door." He paused, then added with a quiet honesty that made my chest tighten, "If I can." I frowned. "What do you mean, if?" Valen hesitated, and his vulnerability showed again. This wasn't a king posing for power. This was a man confessing a fear. "When the creature called me," he said softly, "it touched the oldest part of my curse, the part tied to choice, the part tied to my heart." I stared at him. "Are you saying it changed something?" He nodded once. "A seal can be reforged," he said, But a heart that has been seen becomes a target. The words should have scared me, but instead they made me feel something else. Purpose. I stepped closer, careful, respectful of the distance he seemed used to. Then we don't let it turn your heart into a weakness, I said. We make it your strength. Valen looked at me for a long moment, as if measuring whether he was allowed to hope. Why? He asked, almost whispering. Why would you stay after what you heard? I thought of the voices at the door, the way grief tried to trick me into surrender. I thought of Valen's bruised hands, his restraint, his loneliness that felt like a whole second storm inside the castle. Because I know what it's like to feel like your pain is the only thing that proves you loved someone, I said. And because you saved me without even asking for credit. Valen's throat bobbed as he swallowed. No one has said that to me in a very long time. The lantern crackled softly, and the castle felt less cold, less hungry. For the first time since I'd crossed the threshold, I felt something close to safe, not because danger was gone, but because I wasn't facing it alone. Valen extended his hand, palm up, formal and gentle. Then come, he said. There is a room where the fire still remembers how to burn. You should be warm. I hesitated, then placed my hand in his. His skin was cool, not dead cold, just different, like stone that had been sitting in moonlight. His grip was careful, like he was afraid of holding too tightly. We walked deeper into the castle together, our footsteps echoing through halls lined with old portraits whose eyes seemed kinder than I expected. Somewhere above us, the storm continued its tantrum. Somewhere beyond the sealed door, something waited and listened. But inside, between the quiet vampire king and the human who'd stumbled into his curse, a different kind of power settled into the air, one the creature couldn't imitate. Not hunger. Not fear. Choice. As we reached the corridor's end, Valen paused and glanced back toward the door, his face shadowed with worry. In a voice so low it was almost a prayer, he said, "If it returns tomorrow night, it will not come for you first." My heart thudded. Who will it come for? Valen's eyes met mine, and the tenderness there was more frightening than the darkness had been. "It will come for the part of me," he said, "that started to want to live." He turned away before I could answer, leading me forward into the dim warmth ahead, leaving me with the terrifying, beautiful understanding that saving him might cost me my way back to the life I knew.